It's Amber Bradley, your host for the unscripted side of LP. It's TalkLP podcast time.
3, 2, 1. 'Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it.
What's up, TalkLP podcast fans? It's Amber Bradley back again with a podcast that you are going to enjoy on this lively and very critical topic. Okay, Frank Patercity, what's up? Director of Corporate Security, Investigations and ORC for Kroger. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, Amber. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We had to. I had to. I wanted to, but we had to because your presentation at Apex was off the charts. Everyone loved it. Talking about, oh man. Well, I should actually let you expand on what you do for Kroger, and then we'll go into what your presentation was because we want to dive a little deeper in it
Sure.
today. I think it would be awesome. So tell everybody what you're responsible for at Kroger, and then we'll get into it.
Sure. Well, and again, thanks for having me. I'm humbled by those remarks. I'm glad people found it enjoyable. And I joke when you read my title to your listeners, right? I'm the Director of Corporate Security, Investigations, and Organized Retail Crime. I tell people there's a reason I don't have business cards because they would have to go on those checks that they give golfers after they read a tournament. But I essentially have the criminal matters for the company. So violence prevention, things of that nature. You can break my team into, say, 5 buckets. You've got organized retail crime, which, goes without saying, everybody knows what that is, but we've got a team dedicated across the country to disrupt and dismantle those organizations. So full-time team for that. We've also got major crimes response. So you think about the worst of the worst crimes that happen out there. We've got people that are dedicated to responding to those. We also manage executive protection for the company, special events, and active assailant response. So you won't hear me call it active shooter. It's an active assailant. And then most recently, and what I presented on at the conference, was threat assessment and management. And I'm happy to, dive deeper into that today because, that can sound like a really scientific term and there's a whole lot that goes into it, but yeah, excited to talk about it some more.
Yeah. So we were just talking off camera about, we are avid readers, reading all kinds of books. I think the industry itself has been under an evolution, right? With this whole active assailant topic, because I learned recently, you may have already known this with your background, which is extensive, which we'll get into, that it's a myth that people just snap, right? I mean, so I was reading this book called Risks Within with Dr. McElhaney. And, he kind of walked through why violence is a process, not an event. And it's eye-opening, right? So obviously being an awareness provider and trainer at heart, you have to start educating your frontline people on these behaviors of concern, right? The FBI coined the term. I think there was a fight over who coined the term, but to understand these behaviors of concern, right? So talk to us about, when you talk about threat assessment, understanding that this is a complicated situation, that when you think about active assailant, when companies say, there's nothing we can do about that, it's just a random luck of the draw, whether you're the one, like tell us your perspective on that, the evolution. I know this is like a 7-part question, but like what your charter is and how it came about and your perspective. And I'm sure I'll interrupt you with follow-ups.
Good. Yeah, I'm going to need you to. But it's a great question. It is multi-layered. But I'll go back to the beginning first. And you're right. It's very, very seldom, right? People just snap and commit an act of violence. That's your lower level, reactive violence where somebody gets upset at something that you said, or you think about like a road rage incident. Somebody cuts you off and you get upset and you resort to an act of violence. Not you, right? But just people and I'm not asking questions here. You're out of my you're out of my jurisdiction anyway. But that's where people just react. It's not that planned predatory violence that's long thought out. And you're absolutely right. It's a complicated problem, but really it's easy. It's easy, so easy we make it complicated. And you think about somebody who is on a pathway to violence, and as threat assessment professionals, the pathway to violence, which actually comes from a book from some fantastic scholars in the field, Doctors Calhoun and Weston, in a book that they wrote, but it maps out the progression, the literal pathway to a violent targeted attack that people often follow. And it starts in the same place. There's something someone's upset about, a grievance. They've been wronged, either perceived or actual. And I don't want to get, too scientific, right? But if you think about it, they start with that grievance, and they escalate along this path. And there are steps along the way that they escalate, which ultimately culminates in a targeted attack. And it may not be, an active assailant. It may not be a major event, but it could be a shooting, or it could be an assault, or some other form of violence. And the trick here is you can intervene at any point along this pathway, ideally immediately, and you can redirect someone, and you can take them off of this pathway. Just because someone's walking a pathway to violence does not mean they're going to culminate. It's not going to culminate in an attack. And that's what we have to understand. It's, you hear, like, what did it start after 9/11, New York City, see something, say something. Well, yeah, absolutely. See something, say something, do something. The power of hello. It's okay to ask somebody, hey, are you okay? How you doing? Like, your baseline behavior is here. And if you're behaving in a way that's very different or concerning to others, or, you're talking about things that are inappropriate in the workplace, you're talking about firearms, that's where you have to recognize the warning signs, because, like you said, Dr. McElhaney says, people don't just snap. We see it in the news, and we go back after these active assailant events, and I'm not going to say the assailant's name, but the one that we just saw in the news in Maine just last week, right? You see all the things that person was doing and saying, and all the warning signs that they were exhibiting, that you knew that something was going to happen. And I'm not going to, armchair quarterback a response, but it's just illustrative to show that these things don't just happen out of thin air. It's not, you don't just wake up one day and decide, yes, I'm going to be an active assailant. It's a build.
Yeah, and in that build too, I mean, aren't they finding, which supports your point, that there is almost all the time leakage of a plan,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great that you use that term, leakage, right? That's an industry term that's used universally by threat assessors. And it could be, direct leakage, somebody telling someone else, hey, don't go to school tomorrow because I'm gonna do this, or, if they take away my vacation, they'll be sorry. Things like that. It could be veiled, but it's either in person or it could be online. We've seen that with assailants, especially, generationally speaking, as technology improves, some of these assailants, you'll see that they're using different apps, different social media platforms to put things out, because they almost want to be stopped. In some cases they do. They want you to stop them. And
let me ask you really quick. Is that because, in your expertise, that this individual knows that this plan will most likely ultimately end with them dying? I mean, that's the whole, if it's almost like the cry for help scenario, right? It's like they know they're about to do something that's probably going to end in their death. I mean, do they know the motivation of the leakage?
It could be that, yes. Yeah, I think each situation is different, but oftentimes, yes, that's it.
Yeah. So knowing that this is like an education thing, right? And I've talked to some experts who are like, oh, people have been doing these types of threat assessment boards for years and forever. And I'm like, well, I don't, because I hadn't heard of it, right? And this is our industry, loss prevention, asset protection. Like, we're protecting that people assets of the company, right? So, curious, is this this is something that if people are listening, it's like, oh, hey, this is relatively new, and then you got to start figuring out how to set it up.
Yeah, so I won't say it's new. I will say it's become much more prevalent in recent years. It's I tell people I had an awakening. So I was a police officer for 13 years. And a handful of other things before landing here at Kroger, and
including a corporal in the Marine Corps.
The backbone of the Corps, by the way, the corporals are, yes. Um,
That's
um,
that's pretty impressive. So I had to throw that in there.
I appreciate it very much. But yeah, I had an awakening and I realized like, wow, this stuff this workplace violence stuff. It's happening everywhere. And all the stops along the way that I've made in corporate security gigs in big corporate America, I've picked more of it up. And I started to learn of organizations like the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals and a wonderful industry network to get hooked up with. And for any of the listeners out there that are interested, I'm happy to help make that connection. But that's a group that's, dedicated to preventing targeted violence. And, I learned almost everything through them in one form or fashion. And then, on the job, of course. But yeah, it's definitely become much more prevalent as we see the, active assailant numbers, increase. And I will say, I don't want to go too far off into a tangent, but I think of the media contagion. And I think I talked about this in my presentation where, we in the media, it almost glorifies inadvertently, of course, what's taking place. Like this last shooting that took place in Maine, there was a news article where they talked about this is the deadliest shooting, so far this year. Well, the next assailant is out there seeing this in the news over and over and over again. And they see what this deadliest shooting body count is. And they think, well, I can top that, which is why that we typically see, 1 to 2 more within 13 to 14 days after an active assailant makes national news like we did. And there's, speculation around, I don't know if you saw the story about Glenwood Springs, Colorado at the amusement park where they found, yes, we don't know what that assailant's intentions were yet, but
Yeah.
it looks likely that they were poised for an attack. Now we'll wait and see what the investigation unfolds, right? But that was 6 days after what took place nationally. So yeah, the media contagion is a real thing.
Really quick, do you think that and the media would never agree to this because they know that this kind of information sells their time. People want to know because everyone's terrified of this happening to them, right? So do you think that if they just stopped covering it, this would completely go away?
I don't think so. Not completely. I don't think that would be the case, but that, there are campaigns out there and I don't know exactly what their names are, but it's, I think don't name them or don't say their name. There's campaigns out there that are dedicated towards not glorifying or which is, and you're starting to see a lot of the media will do a very good job with that, and law enforcement is really good in terms of not referencing the assailant by name and mentioning their name.
This news drives me nuts. I got to tell you. So the recent one in Nashville, right, at the private school, that's literally was, I don't know, 15 minutes from where my daughter had gone to private school. And I mean, it rocked us, right? Because it was so close to home, right? So, and obviously she had ties to the school, but I'm telling you, they played her coming into that school over and over, like from the cameras in the school, and you want to say, what are you doing? Because that's she was like, I mean, the whole thing, right? Over and over and over. And that's anyway, to your point, it's like making me crazy.
Well, and that's part of it, right? It should be made about the victims, and you have a duty to inform folks about the news and what took place, and especially if the suspect is still outstanding, you've got to put their name and their picture out there, like in Maine. But after that, right, like let's stop just giving that airtime to that person, because the next active assailant is watching and seeing that. And if they're desiring notoriety and they want to be famous, that's a way for it to happen. You could accelerate them on their plan. But, they also, you'll hear the media sometimes use terms like they left behind a manifesto. And it's not a manifesto, right? Like they're not an important figure or political appointee or electee that has a manifesto that's worthy of reading. They left behind a journal, and it's just these little terms that we can use and change to take the power away from what they do are very important.
Yeah, totally agree. So when you look at like the setup of how Kroger goes about this, and obviously you probably can't share the complete ins and outs, but of the things that you can share of people going, okay, what does that exactly look like? Like, is there 20 people? Is it 2 people? I mean, is there some best practice for how many people? Because obviously Kroger's a pretty big company. You guys have a lot of
Mhm.
employees, and obviously comes with that a lot of different scenarios. So tell us a little bit about the setup.
Sure. Yeah. So first off, I'm really proud of this team. It's our behavioral risk intervention team, and it's new. It's been in existence for just about a year now, formally. And it's something that our organized retail crime managers and asset protection managers across the company were doing, for years, right? They were managing, threats or concerning behavior, but we've become very dedicated towards it, and we now have a full-time team, which again I'm so proud of. And it's led by a PhD, a forensic psychologist, Dr. Matthew Talbot, who is really a titan in our industry. And I'm definitely going to introduce you to him as well. But he leads a team of, we'll call it a handful of dedicated professional threat managers. And that's their discipline. That's what they do. They're not asset protection folks. They're not corporate security folks. They're threat managers, and this is their professional discipline. And we've made that investment to help keep our associates, our customers safe, and understanding that we have to change with the times, and this is what it takes to keep people safe. It's one of our core values, and we mean it. We're going to do it. And I will say, there are a handful of other retailers that are out there with similar kinds of teams, and they're doing really great work too. I'm I really think this team is going to be the best in class with what I've seen them do so far in just one short year. It's truly astonishing. They're definitely making a difference and keeping people safe.
So it's really this team trying to understand risk factor of a potential termination, or if a loss prevention person has a certain case. I mean, I guess if I'm a listener, I'm kind of wondering, like, there's obviously some process between your normal everyday guy that's I'm gonna kill you, and they walk out and they're gone and you never see them again, right? Versus
Exactly.
something that is going to require this team's attention.
Exactly right. So that's, and I think I briefly touched on this maybe at the presentation, but there's lots of different types of violence out there. But there's two specific types that we will deal with, right? The affective violence, affective with an A. You've got and that's what I was talking about, like with the road rage. Somebody is reactive, they're emotional, they're impulsive. It's an upstanding citizen who may have had a really bad day that comes into your store, and they get some sort of they run into a problem, like what they came in to buy was out of stock, or they had to wait in a really long line, but they've got all these other things happening in their life that's making them upset, and they make that horrible comment that they really didn't mean. They say something terrible, that they're going to do something, and they don't mean it. They don't have the means to do it. They're not going to do it. And they walk out and they leave. Is that a case for a threat assessment professional? No, that's not what they're there for. Predatory violence is what a threat assessment professional is geared towards. And that's planned. That's a planned attack. That's emotionless. It's devoid of emotion. And it's purposeful. It's somebody who is moving along that pathway to violence and has a dedicated mission. It's not somebody who just gets upset and says something dumb. It's somebody who maybe makes a veiled comment, and over time it builds and it builds and it builds. And those are the warning behaviors that we look for, is people that are on that pathway of predatory violence.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you think about, as I mentioned at the top of this, I wouldn't think there's any organization on the planet that could have, outnumbering a team of these people from your associate ratio, right? It's like, okay, that you have
Yeah,
to have some cutoff of some matrix to understand behavior, which is why it's so important to use awareness and training to make your frontline people understand
completely.
what this is, right? I mean, because you, in that book from Dr. McElhaney, when they talk about, it's not like you or I, right, are in a sphere of people that are violent, right? I
Hmm.
mean, you talk about different socioeconomic levels, like all of this stuff. But the point is, and I thought this was an incredible point that he made, was it's not about you per se, right? Like when you go
Yeah,
to a theater, let's say for a show, because now I'm always like, where are the exits? What would I do?
good.
It's not about who's violent in your own sphere, right? I mean, it is everyone sitting around you, right? It's like, what do they have going on in their life, right? I mean, you've got maybe some domestic violence issues. You've got, and he went through some of these case studies that I'm
Yeah.
assuming, does your team like incorporate those types of issues too? Because it's the guy that has the restraining order that's coming to the store, because he's out of jail or whatever, right?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that. And there's a couple of things there. But you brought up a really good point, and you can't tell what's going on with somebody just by looking at them. You can't look at someone and know that they've got a sick child at home, or they've got a looming bankruptcy for the second time, or if they lose this job, they're going to lose their insurance. You can't know that. And people are good at putting up a wall, right? They don't want you to know something you're not going to know it. So we talk a lot about kindness and empathy, especially in dealing with and managing threats and behaviors of concern, because you may have heard me say this, but you can't terminate a threat. You can terminate a person who made a threat, but you're not going to terminate that situation. You're fired. Let's put a guard outside for a couple of days. We'll be good. That's not how it works. The threat assessment and management process works much differently. You have to identify a threat, you have to assess a threat, and then you ultimately have to manage it safely. And that's a process. And it takes people who are trained. To your point, we have to force multiply and we have to educate. You brought up a great point about your frontline leaders. Those are the folks that are out there. They're out there every day. They're in the stores. They in your listeners' organizations, right? They're out there. They see what's going on. They know their people. They should, right? As a good leader, you have to know your people. You have to know what their baseline is and what's going on with them. So when they're above or below the baseline, you can have that conversation. Hey, how's it going? You all right? I've noticed this. Are you doing okay? And you learn a lot through those things. And you can often intervene with somebody who could be potentially on that pathway to violence before it even gets to that point. And ultimately, you can redeem a lot of people, because you can't terminate a threat. You can redeem them and get them well. Just like if, it's my job to I don't know, I carry boxes all day long. That's my job. And I hurt my knee. Are you going to fire me because my knee's hurt? No. You're going to send me to rehab and I'm going to get my knee fixed by a doctor. And then you're going to check and make sure that my knee's fixed. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to continue carrying boxes. And that's what we ultimately aim to do for people that we can. If we can redeem you and bring you back healthy, we're going to do that. And that's, Amber, really, that's how we fix this cycle of active assailants, because you see isolationism, people are just kind of cast away. It's not my problem. Let's move it down here. They're not going to bother us. And ultimately that's, I think, the catch-22, that it keeps coming back around because of that. So we're trying to take a different approach.
Yeah, those are phenomenal points. And so if I'm, I'd love to play the advocate, right? Like the devil's advocate here. But if I'm a smaller company, right? And you're like, okay, look, I'm barely making it. I've got one other guy than me. I got a small LP team. We also do risk. We also, it's like the whole and also thing. It's like, how, if we're a smaller company and not a Kroger, like, what steps do you suggest people take, because they know this is important, but maybe they just don't have the resources to dedicate or have a psychologist on staff, like all of these things,
Sure.
but they've got a CEO that says if they stole from us, they're fired and get them out of here. You know what I mean? Like going up against maybe people who think it's, well, just snap, nothing we can do, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it's about education, and sometimes you got to educate up, right? You got to explain to them and show them why those aren't the right decisions sometimes. And I understand not everybody is maybe as fortunate as we are with the leadership we have, because we have executive champions here that understand and believe in what we're doing, and they believe in our people. But what I would say, Amber, to that small team that's listening, that just is, like, yeah, that's Kroger. They've got an endless, they can do that. Is to leverage your network and your outside resources. There are plenty of companies out there that do this line of work, and I mean consultants and folks that can help you along the way. I think you mentioned one earlier in the conversation, but there's a lot of folks out there, and if you leverage that network, especially through ATAP, that Association of Threat Assessment Professionals, you'll find people who can help you, whether you're small, whether you're large, or you're somewhere in between, and they can work with you. The beauty that I found with this field, this smallish group, and it's growing, thankfully. The beauty that I found is I've never had anybody turn me away. I've never had anybody turn me away for help, and I in turn will pay that forward, and I'll never turn anybody away. At the end of any of these presentations I do, my cell phone number goes on the last slide, and I've had people reach out to me, and if I can't help them, I put them in touch with someone who can, because this work is just too important for us to just operate in silos. That's just not going to work. So lots of resources out there, and for your listeners, I'm easy to find. There's, like I said, there's only one other Frank Patercity running around on the planet, and he's 80 in Florida living his best life. So if you need anything, you know where to find me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm curious too, a lot of people hear this stuff. I don't know if it's a lot. I don't know. I'm generalizing, but, and they think, well, look, I don't know if I agree with kind of coddling the person, or maybe making sure they have this soft landing, which we've heard of before, right? I mean, if they've done something terrible, they've stolen from us, they're causing problems, like how are we supposed to, I heard this a bunch actually, reward them by giving them, paying them to leave or giving us soft landing. This is what they did, regardless of whatever they got going on in their head, they're out. And we can't afford a soft landing for all of the people that need fixing or redeeming or healing, or, look, everybody should be sitting on a therapist couch. I'm a big believer in that, right? Everybody's got something to process. I don't care if you're Jan Brady and she, the Bradys are messed up. Let's face it, right? So everybody's got something to process. So these people are like, look, how can we possibly afford this? What is your stance on that? And like, how do you guys answer that type of response?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's a fair one, right? And it's all about education. I will tell you that I'm a firm believer in soft landings, and it's that kindness and empathy that I talked about. Even the people that you may not think deserve kindness or empathy because they did something bad or said something bad, they may be the ones that deserve it the most. And it's an investment when you think about it, right? If you've got somebody who tells you, well, I'm not going to pay for bad behavior, I'm not going to manage this person out with a soft landing. Well, you're probably going to pay for it one way or another, right? You think about it as an investment in security. If your ultimate goal is to safely manage or mitigate a threat, and if that means exiting someone out of your organization, to do that safely is the goal. And however you have to do that is however you have to do that. Because if you create this confrontational exit, you're not going to do any good for yourself. And as few and far between, especially in a smaller or mid-sized organization, as these situations may be, it's going to be more cost effective for you to do it right the first time and safely manage someone out with a soft landing than it is to just take a hard line and then deal with the fallout from that, which who knows what it could be. You can't predict, right? But I also think about the I just lost my train of thought. I think I might have covered it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's almost like you would say it's kind of ego based when people said, look, you made a bad choice, you're out of here, and not thinking a little more broadly about the impact of that, right, to the person, that's a kind, be a human way, but also to the company, and the fact that, okay, fine, well, how are you going to feel if they come back and commit an active assailant type of incident, and then you're talking to parents of your dead employees? Then what?
Yeah, and it came back to me, the thought that I lost there momentarily. There are lots of ways that you can manage someone out safely, right? If the business decides that they want to move the person on, it's not always paying somebody to lead. That's not how it has to work. There's lots of things that you can do, and extending, maybe, mental health care benefits for somebody, relatively cost effective for a company to do. But it could be that goodwill that the person needed, because, like I said, you can't just look at somebody and know what's happening in their life or in their background. And it's a life altering event for them to lose their job. And if you can help that person along the way and help them move on down the path safely, that's a win for everybody involved. So to me, it's an investment versus, paying for bad behavior, which I've heard before. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I think it goes back to this, the evolution of this topic, right? I mean,
Yes.
people understanding and companies understanding that there's something you can do. And it doesn't always have to be some huge team or we're going to pay them for a year just to make sure they don't come back and are mad and all that kind of stuff. So, well, we might have to leave it there for now. However, and this is totally self-serving, Frank, but now that you know me, it's like, we are super passionate about keeping people safe, right? And part of our core business is training and awareness, and it's educating these people on these behaviors of concern, right? I mean, like a per example that you stated was, what is the baseline behavior, right? Susie's always laughing and jokey, and then over weeks she's withdrawn and sad, and it's like, these are things that you can teach your associates to notice. That's part of your point.
Yes, and it's not to say just because, Susie is sad and she's normally happy that she is your next active assailant. That's not what we teach in threat assessment management. What we teach is it's okay to talk to Susie and say, "Hey, Susie, I noticed you didn't seem yourself. How's everything going? Are you okay?" And just something so simple as that could redirect somebody if they were to be on a pathway to violence.
Yeah, it's almost like, and I always use this example, I'm in the Atlanta airport and they say, we take a strong stance against human trafficking. If you see anything, say something. Here's the number. And to be honest with you, I don't know what human trafficking looks like, right? I guess I know, but I need a little education about what I'm looking for. And it's the exact same thing with your associates. It's like, you have to tell them, just like run, hide, fight, right? It's behavior. It's like muscle memory, right? With this, you have to tell them, hey, maybe somebody's saying, well, I'm going to get him, or he's, this company's always out to get me, or whatever it is. It's like, you have to teach your employees what it looks like. The old days of just saying, call this hotline, are over. Like, you've got to help them understand, what are they calling about? What does it look like? Right?
Yeah, you said it best when you said an evolution. Times have changed. We have to change with them. And I everywhere I go, I don't like to hear that's just the way we've always done it. Well, maybe that wasn't the best way. We're gonna look, and we're gonna see if we need to evolve with the times. And I'm very thankful to be at a company that's willing to support that. And I hope your listeners are their interest is piqued by threat assessment and management, and they want to learn more, because I truly think this is the way for us to prevent some of these targeted attacks, some of these mass attacks that we're seeing in the news. There's something more that we can do other than just offering good thoughts and vibes. There's things you can do.
Yeah, and it's super relatively low cost from a training and awareness perspective, for sure. I mean, you're talking about like that versus investing in, I don't know, all different types of facial recognition, license plate recognition. Like, all of that is important. Not saying it's not.
Sure.
If you think about some baseline things to do, looking at the training part is probably one of the most inexpensive yet cost effective, and right in their face every single day. That's why we're passionate about it.
No, you're right. And this is a human discipline. This is about the behavior, and technology certainly has a place in preventing bad things from happening. But to your point, training and educating people on what warning signs to look for, and then knowing what to do with that information once they have it is key.
Yeah. Well, Frank, we're going to have you back so we can talk more about you, although I think this
All right.
is a super important and relevant topic. So we'll actually have a link to Frank's LinkedIn bio in the show notes, so that way you could hit him up on LinkedIn and contact him there. And then also, if you're interested in understanding more about training and awareness that my company provides, we'd love to talk to you to help break the cycle of active assailant. I mean, it is massively important. I should say too, calibration, we have free school posters, Frank, on our website that
Awesome.
so for kids, we have one for elementary school, we have one for middle school, one for high school. All you have to do is direct your high school to our website. There's printable, downloadable files for you there that they can write in their 1-800 number to the poster. So it's free for schools. We did that after the active assailant in Orlando at that high school there. So we're just trying to do our part, but we appreciate people
Awesome.
like you, Frank, spreading the message, and at Kroger trying to keep everybody safe, man. We appreciate your time.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Amber.
Thank you.
Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.